All right, ladies and gentlemen, on to our consumer session. What do consumers want, and is the private health system delivering? This panel will be looking at what health consumers want from their private healthcare and what we can do to deliver it. I understand that in years gone by at this conference there has been consumer sessions, but usually without any actual consumers. So today this session has been designed so that we can hear from our consumers themselves, to hear their real life lived experiences and what they see as important. Let me introduce you to each of them, starting with Julie Metaxatos. We're just doing this in no particular order, so Julie there in black. Born in Carlton, she now lives hidden away at her home in Hidden Valley in country Victoria. She is a former fruit and veggie supervisor at Safeway, went on to be appointed as a bank manager for Westpac. Then a couple of years later, Julie worked on the project team to merge Bank of Melbourne and Westpac nationally. More recently, Julie has had her book titled A Fractured Life published, which will be on sale during morning tea. Being invited to events like this, Julie says, to speak has been a huge highlight. This is not the type of thing that she has done before. Outside of work, she loves walking on a golf course, which she lives adjacent to, doing water aerobics, gym twice a week. She sings in her spare time, and she told me that she secretly likes watching The Bachelor. Although, to be honest, now it's not that secret anymore. She has a 16-year-old cat, Rolly, who I assume is called Rolly because at that age he is probably too old to walk anywhere. She told me she also has a son, James, who's 19, but I thought it was worth mentioning that Julie told me about the cat before telling me about her son. Embarking very soon on a European trip to visit her family in Malta and Italy this year. It's been 27 years since she last visited. I met Julie at a Westpac conference that I was emceeing late last year, where she shared her story, and she will again today. She is a true survivor and an inspiration to many. We thank her for sharing her own consumer experiences. Please welcome Julie Metaxatos. Next to Julie, on Julie's left, we have Jan McMahon OAM, Chair and Executive Officer, Private Mental Health Consumer Carer Network. Adelaide born, Jan has worked with the mental health area as a consumer advocate since the late 90s. She founded the Private Mental Health Consumer Carer Network Australia, which is a recognised peak Australian organisation. She has appeared before 10 parliamentary inquiries. She's been a member of a number of Australian government committees, national evaluation groups, expert advisory and reference groups, as well as many other key national mental health policy and decision-making committees. She has been a member of the board of the Mental Health Council of Australia until March this year, was a member of the RANCP Members Advisory Council. She was a director of the Australian Psychology Accreditation Council for many years. In 2008, she was awarded the Medal of the Order of Australia in recognition of her advocacy work. When not advocating, which is rare, Jan is an Adelaide Crows fan. She tells me she likes watching Homeland and Gogglebox. Please give a round of applause for Jan McMahon OAM. Next up, we have Rachel Matthews at the end of the row. Rachel is a health consumer. She hails from the UK, now lives in Queensland, co-convener of local support groups for Queensland Disability Network and MS Queensland, and a retired board member of both organisations. Rachel is a person with MS who is a former medical secretary, a former Jillaroo journalist, music teacher. One of her first jobs, she tells me, was stuffing crocodiles in Burketown in the 60s. She has sung at the National Folk Festival in Alice Springs in the 80s and has played cello in the backing orchestra for a 1980s Chinese pop star. A long-time community arts worker and disability activist in Mount Isa, Townsville and Brisbane. She retired to Brisbane in 2005. Pilates fan, viewer of Annabelle Crabb's Kitchen Cabinet, and a music lover. Her philosophy is that music and all the arts are languages of great power and importance for all of humanity. Participation in the arts is a passionate, ecologically friendly activity, whatever your age and whatever your ability. She tells me that she sees herself as a conduit between professional and amateur, classical and folk, city and bush, performing and visual, sublime and ridiculous. Her hobby, she says, is living, and her secret for a healthy life is a large dose of bloody-mindedness. Please welcome Rachel Matthews. And last, but by no means least, closer to me at the end here, Darlene Cox, Executive Director, Healthcare Consumers Association, born in Sydney but migrated to Canberra, which she's called home for 25 years or so. She's been involved in the consumer movement since the late 90s. She's been the Executive Director of Healthcare Consumers Association since 2008, a respected advocate for health consumers with an excellent knowledge of the health system, both locally and nationally. She's a board member of the Australian Council of Social Services, a member of the Australian Health Practitioner Regulation Agency Community Reference Group, the Australian Commission for the Quality and Safety in Healthcare NSQHS Standards Steering Committee. She says her work in increasing the awareness of health literacy at the local level as well as the national level has been a highlight. In the past 7 years, she's done some great work in ensuring that consumer voices are heard in the planning and design of health infrastructure. Outside of her work, she says she enjoys nothing more than watching any sport that involves a ball. She said that shouting for her team is a great form of therapy after the frustrations that she has in her advocacy work. Please give a big shout out and welcome Darlene Cox. Darlene, welcome. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so that is our esteemed panel of consumers. Before we go to them, just to set things up, this session provides us with the opportunity to release the first in a series of videos that will make up the APHA Health Reassurance campaign. These videos will showcase real-life consumers talking about the things that they value in private hospitals. We actually have video 1 with us to show you, which is Julie Metaxitos's private hospital story. I'll give some insights. If we can please roll that video before we get things underway.
On Christmas Eve 2013, I was involved in a head-on car collision and was fighting for my life in hospital. In the recovery, I spent 9 months at the private hospital rehab centre. I was pretty broken at the time, and they just provided that safe space for me to recover and give my all and focus on my recovery. The extra attention was pretty much instrumental to me getting better. I developed relationships with the staff and enabled me to form a trust and a bond, and they understood what my needs were. We were able to work together as a team to get through some really difficult and challenging times. It's really important to get that specialised care, that one-to-one. The time that they spend with you is critical to your well-being. Having a private room was extremely important to me. I was at the time very vulnerable and feeling self-conscious about the way I looked. Plus I wanted some private time and space where I could see my family without sharing the room with other people. I was away from home for such a long time, and yet the experience I had here was like a second home, away from home. I think it's paramount that you're in a place that's so well-staffed, professional, clean, and a feeling like you're nearly at home but you're not, where you're trying to recover and get better. Private hospitals are definitely an important part of Australian healthcare. Definitely glad I have private hospital cover. I actually hoped and asked my husband whether we had it because I knew it was going to be a long haul in hospital, and I wanted to make sure that I was getting the best possible care.
All right, this video highlights, I guess, what we all heard and discussed yesterday. Australian health consumers have a broad range of needs from what is no doubt, I'm sure you'll all agree, a complex health system. That health system covering public, private, primary care through to acute hospital treatment, rehab services and right through to ancillary care. Our focus, as I said, for this session is the private health system generally. That may be its contribution to the wider health system, its separate but interrelated components, private hospitals, private medical practitioners, primary care specialists, diagnostic pharmacy, ancillary services, private health service and private hospitals in particular. So let's get started. First thing that we thought that we would do is give all of our panellists a couple of minutes just to give their own perspective and their story. So Julie, seeing as though we've just seen a little bit about your journey, can you give us a little bit more information?
Okay, hi, I'm Julie. I'm married and I'm a mum, as you know. I had a car accident 3 years ago on Christmas Eve 2013, and I broke everything from my chin down. I was trapped in the car for 50 minutes and I needed to be cut out. So I was bleeding to death at that point. I was airlifted to the Alfred Hospital where they put me into an induced coma. I've had extensive stays in hospital. I actually spent 9 months in hospital between both the Alfred Hospital and the Brunswick Private Rehabilitation Centre, and I've endured almost 60 surgeries to date. So I'm really passionate about patient care because I lived and breathed it, and that's why I decided to write the book. And my book basically talks about my experiences and my journey and seeing life through the eyes of a patient. And it also has my carers also are interviewed in my book, and they talk about what they were faced with when I walked into their establishment. I was like 7 different patients in one body, so they had to deal with simultaneous injuries. I couldn't feed myself, I couldn't walk, I couldn't do anything, and so we slowly I had to be rebuilt pretty much. So that's why I'm here to hopefully just share a bit of an insight to what I experienced and what worked for me and really got me to where I am today.
Okay, thanks, Julie. Jan, we'll go to you. Give us some insights into your perspectives and experiences.
Yes, thank you, Andrew. Look, I have a life beyond mental health advocacy. I have 7 beautiful grandchildren and 2 children and 2 stepchildren, all adults, of course. Look, my journey started in the mental health system in Adelaide. Ramsay Healthcare there is the only service provider. So it was towards the end of the 80s that I had my first admission there, and that lasted for a month. Since then I've had several more, both at the 2 inpatient units in Adelaide. I have had the full gamut of services in the mental health system in that I attend day programs, etc. So my journey resulted, I think, many years ago as a teenager when lots of mental health issues seemed to emerge. Mental health and you learn to live with it. It's there in the morning when you wake up and it's there when you go to bed at night. Not dissimilar to physical issues. I have a great deal to thank Ramsay's in Adelaide for. I began my advocacy journey there in 1997 when health funds were working with the service providers, the private hospitals, to find a way of keeping people out of inpatient care and to do that greater support in the community. And they did this through the hospital in the home trials. It worked out to be very economical for the health funds. I think it saved them about 1/3 of the cost. The trials in Adelaide were between Ramsay's and Cabrini, palliative care, and rehab. Those trials were followed in Victoria, in Melbourne. So at that time, I was very, very ill, and I have to say that the advocacy started me on the journey, which I've very much enjoyed and appreciated, and I've been very passionate about. So I have a great deal to thank Ramsay's for from that perspective. You know, we talk about employment being a really big issue, particularly for people with a mental health issue and mental illness. And I have to say that that it has been my saving grace, really, being involved in advocacy, mental health advocacy. So I'm very grateful that I'm here today. I'm very grateful that I'm well. I'm very grateful that I haven't had or required any mental health services for some years. I think that's probably my journey thus far, and I look forward to years in retirement and looking after my little grandchildren.
Okay, thanks, Jan. Darlene, give us an introduction to you and your perspectives.
Hi everyone. I've been involved for about 20 years as a consumer advocate. I sort of came from a position where I'd had family experience of things not quite going to plan, and at the time I was much more involved in gay and lesbian advocacy, and so I sort of switched my focus from that to trying to improve our health system. So I firmly have the belief that the only way we can get the health system we need is by having consumer voices and the clinicians' voices, because we need to form a partnership at that level. You know, we are the experts of how our bodies feel, of the symptoms we're experiencing, but unless we're supported, we can't tell you what you need to do to help us. So what happens is we don't have the language necessarily to describe what's going on, so you run more and more diagnostic tests. So I think that if we can build the skills of consumers to try and understand our bodies more and communicate well, and train the health providers to ask us questions to elicit those responses, we're going to get a little bit closer to nirvana. We can't keep going on running a health system, this crazy hybrid that we have that's confusing for all parties involved. So I'm really keen to get consumer voices driving change so we have a system that responds to our needs and our community can afford.
Okay, thanks, Darlene. And Rachel, if you can give us an insight into your experiences.
Well, I feel a bit of a fraud here, actually, because I've hardly ever been in hospital. I've been in hospital to have my babies. That was 45, 46, 47, you know, that's many years ago. And I've been in for 2 nights to have a colonoscopy. But I've been asking a lot of friends as well, who've spent a lot of time in hospital. I think the main thing that people want is to be treated as being a person, not a number, obviously. And that the hospitals are really clean, the food's good, and they're really integrated. They look at you as an integrated person, and particularly when you have a disability, but you might be in hospital for another reason. You know, it's very important to see if someone has a physical disability, that that's part of the whole package. I'm very keen on advocacy, so yes, I'm here on behalf of Health Consumers Queensland, and also with Queensland Disability Network. It's all about nothing about us without us, so yeah.
Okay, thanks, Rachel. Look, we're going to open things up, not looking specifically only at private hospitals, but at the private health system in general. So my question is for all panellists. We might start with you, Darlene. What do you think that consumers want from the private health system in general?
Number 1, safe care. Number 2, safe care. Number 3, safe care. So we have to have good quality, safe care that meets our needs. So what does that mean? Well, I'm talking about let's have information that follows the patient through the system. Now, for many of us, we're bumping in and out of the public and private systems with particular conditions. And yet the number of times we have to stop, tell our story again, have more diagnostic tests because the information hasn't followed us where we have been. So unlocking the information flow so it follows us, not caught in the clinical repositories that are out there, would be one way of improving or arriving at that destination of safe care. The other is I'd like us to think about better public reporting around what is the quality of the care that's being delivered. I do most of my advocacy work in the public system, but we have in Canberra a number of private hospitals who we talk to. The number of times I have CEOs, general managers of hospitals, quality and safety people telling me, trust me, this is a great facility, really good care, safe care. Well, don't take it the wrong way, but no, I'm not going to trust you just because you say that. I want to see the evidence to demonstrate why we as a community should be invested in the services that you are providing. I want to know about the safe care that you provide. Also, I think about what do we want from private health system? We want a well-trained and supported workforce. That means if you've got agency staff, make sure that they know what they're doing, that they're properly inducted. Let's match the skill base of your workforce to the acuity level of the person before them. Don't put an inexperienced or an agency nurse that works 4 days a month on a post-operative ward where people are in pain and don't know, they don't get their needs met. So what do we need from the private health system? We want safe care, and there's some of the things that I think we can do to get there.
Okay, thanks for that. Rachel, we'll go with you. What do you think that consumers want from the health system, private health system?
Really agreeing with what everyone else is saying. I certainly take that safe care point. Then getting back to basics, I think basically they want a private room if they possibly can have one, because they want to be, whether they're talking to doctor, well, any of the staff or anyone, you don't necessarily want everybody else hearing what you're doing or saying. I'm not doing very well on that question, Andrew.
That's okay. That's all right. We'll come back to you with. We've got lots more questions here. Jan, maybe we'll go with you.
Yes, look, I hope it's okay, but I will be focusing on the mental health system, the private psychiatric sector. So look, we want accessibility. I'm from South Australia, and one wouldn't ever want to find themselves in the public system in South Australia. So we want value for money, but most of all we want to be able to access treatment and care when we need it. We don't want to have to wait and be affected by bed blocks and so forth. We also want personalised care. I want to be known as Jan. I don't want to be known as, the person with schizophrenia in 3 or BPD in 5. I want to be known as Jan. So I'm looking for that respectful, that individual support and care. It's interesting that Darlene raised the issue of safety, and in mental health, in psychiatry, safety is a huge issue. People come with a variety of experiences during childhood or later, trauma, etc. So the issue of safety, and also because other people, inpatients, are there because they are unwell, a risk to themselves or others. So safety is a huge issue. So of course we want pleasant surroundings, but we need to be able to feel safe. And I also pick up the point that Darlene made about agency nurses. In mental health, there are some do's and some don'ts, which are really important for staff. And those with psychiatric training really understand those. Trauma-informed care and practice, for example, is a huge issue. And I'm not sure agency nurses are fully qualified in that particular area. So, yes, I want to be treated as a person, not a diagnosis.
Okay, thanks for that, Jan. Julie, from your perspective?
So, from my perspective, when I spoke to my husband, I said, we have private health cover, right? Because I want my own room and I want some privacy. That was my key thing at the time. I didn't realise how much else it's more than that. The food, I hope the food was nice. A lot of people complained about food in the gym, so that's a big deal for a lot of people. But for me, it was about having my own room. But then beyond that, it was a behavioural thing. It was about how I was treated. It was really important. I felt, again, safe, and I felt like I was somewhere where I can actually get better, and I was supported in that, and having that team environment where I was being heard and they knew me as Julie and not just another number in the system. They took the time to understand what my needs were and then gave me the best specialist care. I had an occupational therapist for my arms, I had a physio for my legs, I had an exercise physiologist for the equipment, I had hydrotherapy, I had a psychologist, I had a doctor, for the pharmacy. So all these specialised areas came together to get me to where I'm here today. So for me, having all those services accessible was really important, and the professionalism of the staff, and just their empathy and understanding and the communication and being as transparent as possible. I've just recently joined the Brunswick Private Hospital Advisory Committee, and so they are, again, stepping it up another level. We get together and we talk to each other about how we can improve the system, and we've been talking about threads and all sorts of things that you can actually just key into the computer where you can see exactly where that patient's been and some of their history, and then there's like an audit trail. So again, you don't have to tell your story to a lot of people because it's really tough. I know what it's like to have to retell the story, but then they pick up your folder, they look at your profile and think, okay, we understand the background, let's pick up from where everyone left off, type of thing. And you just feel like you're valued. And then also after you get discharged, the follow-up is so important. I've been very fortunate. My carers have been they followed me up. I've just had a recent surgery to see how that went and whether I require any further care. So, it's quite a big, I know there's a lot of things that we look at, but they're important.
Okay, thanks, Julie. We're going to move on to another question. We might start with you, Jan and Darlene. Jan, you touched on this a little bit in your answer to your last question, but I think there's more to explore here. 2 questions. What are the major areas of concern for consumers with the private health system? And what suggestions do you have for private hospitals for ways that they can improve?
Well, again, from the mental health perspective, I listened to Julie and realised that you have no issues about ongoing care, that you will be able to be admitted if and when you need it. In psychiatry, the health funds are really showing some very discriminatory practices for psychiatry. In fact, the trials that I talked about in 97 in Adelaide and then followed up in 98 in Melbourne came as a result of the health insurers wanting to pull out of psychiatry cover for all of their policies. Now, we're seeing this happening again. They're not funding evidence-based programs, for example, dialectical behavioural therapy. They're not funding half-day programs. They're not paying for full psychiatric rebates for people who are readmitted, usually within 28 days. They're not paying for least restrictive services like outreach or community. I believe that a lot of these things we are unaware of as consumers because this is the contractual arrangements between the funds, the health funds and the private hospitals. But I am very, very concerned that if we look at the proposal currently to the Minister for the gold, categorising policies or products, health insurance products, into the gold, silver and bronze area, which there is talk about, with psychiatry only being covered under the gold, for example, and the rest not being covered, that does a number of things. Firstly, those in mental health often come from a low economic background. Many are on the disability support pension and pay their health insurance, usually at the basic hospital cover, because they know that they can enter into a private hospital if and when they need it. I'm very concerned that there is the push again by the health funds, by Private Healthcare Australia, to remove psychiatry from all of their products. Now, this is very worrying for me. It's very worrying for the people that I represent. What can private hospitals do about it? I think they're doing everything they can. I think it's a ministerial responsibility, and I think we, as consumers, need to lobby the government very hard to make sure they hear that psychiatry cover is an absolute must. There is the capacity of the public mental health system in all the jurisdictions would just drown under the weight. My organisation has a letter to the Minister. There's a parliamentary day on Thursday in Canberra that I'll be attending, and I have handouts with all these discriminatory practices. We need to get it through to the government that that's just not on. We just cannot allow the health funds to drop psychiatry from their cover. So I think it's a multi-pronged approach. The hospitals the APHA needs to ensure that the government hears that loud and strong, and we as consumers. And I think it beholds all of our organisations to say, this just won't do. So I think it's a multi-pronged approach.
Okay, Darlene, from your perspective?
A few things. I've already touched on some of those things, but another is, remember for many of us, we end up in the private hospital because we've seen our GP. So the GP is the first gatekeeper, who then has particular referral patterns to orthopaedic surgeons that they know, or cardiologists that they know, or so often the private hospital that we land in may not be our choice, but in fact it may be the doctor's choice, because that's where the relationship is. If the doctor says, I can operate at this hospital or at this hospital, then often consumers will talk to their friends. My mum and dad have a standard focus group called their bowling club, and apart from some wild medication exchanges that goes on, there's also a free-flowing discourse on the quality of private hospitals in their area, and this is in Sydney. So in fact, my mum had 2 knee replacements a couple of years ago and made a decision based on that focus group. Now, the care was pretty good, but I travelled up from Canberra, and I was there for nearly every minute of every interaction that happened to make sure that the care was good. And still I saw some things that I thought were really disappointing. So remember that the GP refers us to where we need to go. We actually don't often then make informed decisions about the private hospital that we choose, because the relationship's already in place. Do think about discharge. Now, a couple of people have already talked about it, but I think some private hospitals are really good about, and specialists, about what to expect from the treatment that you're going to have. There's good health information for people. Your GP can also provide support, or your other treating team. But often where this falls down is what to expect when you go home. If in fact 2 days later you get a temperature, or you're concerned that your scar isn't healing, often consumers report to us that is where they would like some more support. So think about the connection between, once we leave the private hospital, we're going to go back to the community, we're going to go back to our homes and our lives and the people in that area, like the GP. So make it really clear about who we contact to escalate things if we're concerned. One more thing is advanced care planning. We supported someone with a complaint in one of the private hospitals recently, where he had been to this private hospital 3 times in 12 months. The first time he'd provided a copy of his advanced care plan, had assurance that it was on the file. Now, this guy has a life-limiting illness. He's going to be in and out of hospital quite often. He's really confident in the care he's receiving at that hospital. He likes the treating team he has wrapped around him there, so he'll continue to go back there. But the second time he went back, a couple of months later, there was no evidence of the advanced care plan. So they had to have the conversation again. His wife brought it in, they attached it to the file. Now, this time you would think that would, for his 3rd admission, that it would be there, but yet again, it wasn't there. So advanced care planning is, it's here. We as consumers really are engaging. We support the process. It's something that we want the private health system in all its various forms to engage in. Make sure you've got strategies in place that you can record our advanced care plans, and they're there when we're going to be admitted, and follow us through. I'll leave it there.
Okay, while you've got the mic, Darlene, I might ask you another question. As we know, the Australian Commission on Safety and Quality in Healthcare's national standards include the partnering with consumers standard as fundamental to ensuring safety and quality. What do you believe that partnering with consumers actually means?
So there's 3 levels we're talking about. We're talking about patients. So when I'm in my robe with my backside exposed to the world, that's one level. My interaction with the treating team. The other is around consumers and consumer groups and consumer advisory groups and different cohorts. It might be a heart support group who can then provide advice to a service about their experience. And then there's the citizen level, where we as, whether it's taxpayers, whether it's through private health insurance premiums, at that large level, we're interested in the system effectiveness and transparency. So partnering with consumers is all of those levels. Make sure that you've got a strategy for engaging with your patients on a one-to-one basis, that when we ask questions, you explain or answer them in a way that we can understand, that when we turn up in the reception areas, that you understand if we don't have strong English language skills and we need interpreter services, that there's a mechanism there, that we don't have to ask all the time for it. If we turn up and we might have a family arrangement where it's not quite like what you have and what you would expect, it might be that we identify with as family of 3 or 4 people that we want with us at that time. It's about person-centred care, and get to know the people who are using your service. So what does partnering with consumers mean? It's partnership. You have to release some of the control. You have to share some of the power. There's a great Gloria Steinem quote that power can never be granted, it must be taken. So I would actually encourage you to consider granting power to your patients, otherwise we're going to take it.
Okay, Jan, staying with the partners area, how do you believe that private hospitals are going in their efforts to partner with carers?
Look, I'm another hat I wear is a surveyor for ACHS, so I get to see all sorts of public and private systems, really. And as you will all know, under the accreditation system, we really, burrow in and find the goods and the bads. And I think when I talk to consumers, it's invariably come up with complaints rather than saying, hey, the private hospitals are doing really, really well in this area or that area. I mean, it's just the name of the game, really, isn't it? Look, I think that the intent of Standard 2, partnering with consumers in the national safety and quality standards, is very much around let's look at our organisation and see, or our service or our hospital, and see just how we can improve things. What is it like to be in our facility as a patient? We all know, don't we, that informed financial consent came out of the fact that Tony Abbott found himself, when he was health minister, found himself at a hospital and then was hit with all these bills afterwards. I think the private hospitals do very well, but I think one of the areas that some fall down on is engaging consumers at the highest level, at the management level or the board level. I think many have consumer and carer committees or some processes in place, but I'm not sure, and that works okay, but I'm not sure that they actually are shared. Some of the surveys, some of the outcomes are shared with those committee members or the processes. I'm not sure that you have representation on your safety and quality committees, for example, or your management committees. And that's the intent of Standard 2. And that is to say, well, tell us what you think it's like to be in our hospital. So I think that some do it well. Some of the smaller private hospitals, or standalones if you like, have the capacity to be able to engage consumers probably better than some of the corporates, although those from HealthScope will be telling me that you have a consumer at your highest level, and I think that's wonderful. But at the individual service or the individual hospital level, I think more can be done in engaging consumers. So I think keep up, striving towards that, and I think that will be beneficial for the hospitals.
Okay, thanks, Jan. I've got a question here about choosing a facility. When consumers are considering going to a private hospital for care, what is it that they actually want to know about? Rachel, we might start with you.
I think you want to know that the care is going to be great, that yes, that the room's great. If you have a disability, one thing that's really important is if you use an aid like a walker to get around, it's really important that you can use that when you're in hospital too, because often your dependency or your independency is, means you must get out of bed when if you can. Obviously, if you just had an operation, it might be different. But, you need every opportunity to move that you have. And if your chair or your walker has been spirited away, now I get the idea that everyone who's dealing with you needs access to the bed, etc. But when you get out of bed, often you need that thing to be able to move to go to the bathroom. And if it's not there, you know, you're stuck. Or if people say, oh, it's all right, you know, just sit and, you know, go with this chair, you know, we'll take you. No, that's not the point. It's your independence depends on you being able to get out and walk those 5 steps or whatever. So it's really important to know that, yeah, it goes back to this business of being treated as a person and your whole condition being taken into account. And, you know, if you ask for the walker to go to the bathroom, it's not just for that particular thing. It's really important to you. Every day of your life, you're dealing with this a number of times a day. And you just know if you can't do it because you haven't got that bit of equipment, you fear that you're going to lose all that, you know, that you still have.
Okay, Julie, from your perspective, what was it that informed your decision to choose the particular facility that you chose? And having now had the experience, would you look for different things?
Well, I was in the Alfred Hospital, which is a public hospital, but it's a major trauma ward, so that was the best place to be for that. But in terms of recovery, we do have private cover, and we just wouldn't go public because in a private environment we expect the best possible care, and because I was so complex, there was just no two ways about it. That's what we were going to do. So the hospital suggested Brunswick because it was the closest to where we live. We live in country Victoria, and my experience through that was truly amazing. I mean, I had to spend 9 months in hospital, and what it felt like was that I had another home away from home, because they made me feel welcome. They made me understand, you know, that there's a lot of work to be done, and I had to get out of bed to get it done. They encouraged me. They gave me everything I needed. And I think as an individual person, anyone with any form of injury, you don't want to feel alone. You want to feel like that they're on your same team and that you're not competing or, you know, fighting for what you need to, you know, do on a given day. It's actually a joint effort. And so for me, having the open communication, the transparency, open communication in terms of, you know, if things weren't going well, we discussed it and those sort of things. It was real honesty. So for me, the hospital needed to sort of replace my home. So it came very close to it. The people they became my family, the carers, to the point where when I went to the Alfred, because I had a very bad infection that started to eat away at my left leg, following some surgery, I had to go back to the Alfred for 3 months. And the social worker came around to talk to me, and she said, oh, how are you going? I said, I'm fine. She said, well, I said, yeah, I've got family, I've got friends, I'm good. She goes, no, are you okay though? She goes, you've been in and out for months. And then I stopped to think. She goes, what are you missing the most? And I burst into tears. I said, I'm missing my physio at Brunswick Private. Sophie, who was there every single day with me, helping me along. She was the person I was missing. I wasn't missing my family because they'd come and visit, come and go, but she was my constant. So that's the kind of relationship that, you know, I think we need to be better at, because they help me in leaps and bounds, just having them on my side like that.
Okay, thanks, Julie. Darlene, what type of information do you think that consumers would like to see regarding private hospitals?
There's quality and safety data that some of the private hospitals certainly have on websites. And I'm not saying every consumer is going to go and look at your quality and safety stats, but increasingly people will. We want to know about infection rates. We want to know about unplanned readmissions. We want to know about falls. If your falls data is trending down, that's great. Put on your website why it is. What steps have you taken to demonstrate that? If your falls data is trending up or it's above the industry standard, we'll talk about it. If you're a rehabilitation hospital, then it's likely that you may have higher falls rate, but explain it to people. So we want more transparency, not just at the Healthscope Ramsay level. We want hospital-specific data and make it meaningful to us. Having spent some time on the weekend looking at lots and lots of graphs, it's great, it's a good start that people are being more transparent about it, but not a lot of it told me about the standard of care at that hospital, and that's what consumers want. You know, already we are reliant on the GPs and the referral pathways in, But wouldn't it be lovely if we could also go and have a look and say, yeah, I have confidence that the staff are well trained, they're supported, and they're going to provide the care that will meet my needs. Ultimately, that's what we want. Care that is safe, that will meet our needs to support us to get back to living the lives that we want to live.
Okay, another question. There is a lot of talk about the patient's journey, and we know that with a chronic condition, that care journey doesn't start and stop with just one admission. So the question is, what can private hospitals do to support patients in that journey? So Jan, continuity of and access to appropriate care is obviously a huge concern for mental health consumers and carers. So what are your thoughts?
Yes, I absolutely agree. As I said previously, see people coming through your hospital door as an individual, not a diagnosis. I think that's critically important. See the person and help address their needs and their requirements. Provide as much a holistic setting as and care and treatment as you possibly can. I think it's, for many people, engaging social workers to help them and provide information on community supports. What is there out there for this particular individual? What might help for this particular individual? And assist in the pathways to accessing those community cares. Private hospitals can't provide all of the services all of the time that are needed by individuals. And I think that it's incredibly important that as people come again and again and again, that you don't have the feeling that, oh, well, here she is again. Each episode of care, I think, needs to be as individual as coming for the first time. Things happen in people's lives, perhaps ask, not necessarily what medications are doing, but what's happened in their life. And I think that probably is the greatest assistance for people with chronic conditions.
Okay, Rachel, what can private hospitals do to support patients in that journey?
Yeah, well, pretty much what Jan said, actually. I don't think I can really top that. No, these other speakers are too good. I'm thinking, no, they've said it all.
Can I jump in there?
That's reading my
just
mind.
Something
go
about
for it.
On the word journey, I'd be interested. I remember talking to, just before Christmas, someone who'd been through in and out of cancer services for probably 18 months in private provider in Canberra. And I said, now that you've got to the point where you can get back into your life, what's the one thing that you're looking forward to most? And she said, that I don't have someone asking me how my journey is, because it's one of those incredibly overused terms. So that's my gift to you for the day.
I accept it. It is a bit of a reality TV show, sort of talking about journeys. We do have one more question and a couple of minutes left, so this question is for all of you. How do consumers feel about the move towards pay for performance, or rather more specifically, moves being introduced by health insurers and the Commonwealth Government for non-payment or reduced payment for error and hospital-acquired complications? Darlene, we might open with you.
I'm incredibly drawn to this in terms of transparency. I don't think as consumers we have a lot of transparency of what good practice is and what poor practice is, and so pay for performance will do that. But because I'm a cynic, I also think that any system will be gamed, and we will be watching carefully. It's complicated. This is a hotly contested area. There's a lot of money at stake around private health, private hospitals, private health insurance, and I'm not always convinced that the main interests that are driving these things is consumer interests.
Any of the other panellists? I'll open it to anyone. Jan.
Look, I absolutely agree. I don't think it's consumers driving it at all. I think it's the government and the health insurers that are looking at containing costs or paying less rebates, etc. Look, it opens up a can of worms, doesn't it? I mean, hospital-acquired infections, perhaps that's certainly something that can be attributed to the hospital. But what about, where does the doctor, where does the specialist, where does the surgeon, where does the psychiatrist fit in all of this? And has the consumer, has the patient done something that they shouldn't have? Have they stood when they were told not to? It's going to be a heck of a pot, if you like, of who's actually responsible for this. And I suspect that that's going to be the crunch of it, isn't it? Who can we point this to, or who at the end of the day is responsible? And I think the private hospitals run a huge risk here in exposing themselves to liability, or particularly for lesser payment or no payment whatsoever to cover the costs. Look, I think the private hospitals do an exceptional job. That's why I choose to pay my health insurance, which is getting higher and higher and higher every year. So I wouldn't have if I have a choice, I would go to a private hospital.
Julie?
That was probably my thing too. I think, how do you measure it? And, what are you measuring it against? So would you know when to reprimand or not? I think that it needs to be more of an internal measure. I think if it was staff performance-based sort of appraisals, if you like, taking it back to basics, and it could be education, it could be a number of things. I don't know that the payment situation or the reduced fees will fix it. It's more about changing people's behaviours, or educating them to perform what they're supposed to be doing properly, and learning from any mistakes and those sort of things, and then moving from there.
Okay, look, unfortunately there are more questions, but unfortunately we are out of time and we are going to have to move on. So, ladies and gentlemen, can you please join with me and thank for sharing sharing their journeys, but let's just say for sharing their thoughts, wisdom, and their own personal experiences. Could you please thank Julie, Jan, Darlene, and Rachel? Thank you all very much.